Tonight on This Week in Politics.
Higher prices, fewer jobs, and potential of recession.
He is one of the foremost economists of the upper Midwest, Dr. Ernie Goss. And tonight we're sitting down with him to talk tariffs, trade, and taxes.
Brian, I'm really worried.
Hello there, I'm Brian Allen. As you can see, we are on the road this week. We're in Omaha, Nebraska on the campus of Creighton University, where Dr. Ernie Goss teaches economics and keeps his office. You know, we've turned to Dr. Goss several times over the years to walk us through the upper Midwest economy and the national economy, and how what happens abroad affects us here at home. And that is the focus of our conversation once again tonight. And there is a lot to talk about, specifically tariffs, trade, and taxes. And we began with that trade part. For nearly a quarter of a century, Dr. Ernie Goss has kept an eye on the Midwest economy and all the things that can affect it, both good and bad. We tackled trade first, beginning with the lack of a formal trade policy for Pacific Rim nations and their burgeoning economies. One of President Trump's first decisions in office was to pull the U.S. out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreement.
It was one way of at least thwarting some of China's influence in the world trade picture.
Goss says the lack of a formal trade agreement in that part of the world cedes economic influence away from the United States and instead gives it to China.
China or the U.S. back and forth are the two biggest trading nations on the face of the earth. So if we're not there, then China is there. And of course they're prepared in some cases to do what we don't do.
Japan, who was ready to do more business with the U.S., responded to the collapse of the TPP with an economic warning shot.
Japan added a 50% tariff increase on frozen U.S. beef. So that of course, hurt some states, hurt the U.S., it hurt Nebraska, particularly Texas and Kansas and California, those principal states.
And it is not just trade uncertainty in the Pacific that Ernie Goss is keeping an eye on. For more than 2 years now, first on the campaign trail and then in office, President Trump has questioned the North American Free Trade Agreement that ties the economies of the U.S., Canada, and Mexico together. Goss says NAFTA especially is important to South Dakota's economy through the sales of ag products to our neighbors north and south of the border. Yet despite all the uncertainty surrounding trade, Goss says business is booming because the clock is ticking.
Exports and imports are actually rising. You're like, well, this doesn't. Well, it makes perfect sense. I would argue that our exports now have been much stronger recently. Now, why is that? Some of our trading nations are trying to get under the wire before we raise tariffs. And on the flip side, on our side, imports are up because we're trying to buy today rather than buying later when tariffs are fully implemented.
And at the moment, there is a war of words, if not an outright trade war, with Canada, long an American ally. Tariffs are looming in both directions, with China and the European Union, among others. But Ernie Goss says all this could be more bark than bite, that the president may be talking tough as a way to get nations like Canada to negotiate lower tariffs on some American goods. For example,
Canada, of course, as the president has said, has very high tariffs on imported milk. Well, that hurts us. So if he gets his way, that's the president, and those tariffs come down and other tariffs come down, then that's good. And it wasn't a mistake. Now, if he's wrong and we get this tit for tat and retribution, retaliation, no, he's not right.
Ernie Goss says the thing about trade wars is this: they're really easy to start and really hard to stop, because trade wars typically become a game of one-upsmanship.
If Canada retaliates fully and Mexico retaliates fully, then we both lose. And then we retaliate again, they retaliate, and pretty soon we're growing bananas in North Dakota. You know, I mean, there's certain things you got to import, and there's certain things that they need of ours.
And for South Dakota, a trade war would be bad, and on the front lines would be South Dakota farmers. You've heard the phrase that American farmers feed the world. Well, it's true. 2/3
of South Dakota's food processing output is exported. 2/3. I mean, that's a heck of a lot.
And if South Dakota farmers harvest their normal amount but have no one to sell it to, or tariffs make it too expensive for anyone to buy, they sit on that harvest and lose money the entire time. And those higher prices could turn into real long-term problems.
Higher prices, fewer jobs, and potential of recession.
American trade policy is very much up in the air, and Ernie Goss, who is a calm, cool, and collected kind of guy, tells me in a calm voice, all of this really makes him uneasy.
Brian, I'm really worried.
Still to come on tonight's This Week in Politics, we're going to take a closer look at the Republican tax cuts that were enacted by Congress and signed into law by the president. Are they having the intended effect? We'll be right back.